So in this club history, we're looking at Blackpool Football Club, founded in 1887. They currently play at Bloomfield Road, where they've been since 1901. Current capacity of Bloomfield Road is 16,616. Their former home grounds are Rakes Hall and the Athletic Ground. So there's two previous home stadiums in their existence because the club is older than Bloomfield Road. And they have a very interesting history, both good and bad. And the bad history is more recent, the good history is more in the past. So the club's founded in 1887. Found a member of the Lancashire League in 1889 before joining the Football League in 1896. Now, at this time, obviously, the non-league and Football League, there's no promotion or relegation. You have to reapply for your membership. And unfortunately, they were unsuccessful in 1889 as being members of the Football League application process. They're voted out. A year later, they rejoin in 1900, so they technically had two spells in the Football League. They've not been outside the Football League since 1900. Now, they're a very average club until Joe Smith takes over in 1935 as manager, and then they become contenders for the league title. They make 3 FA Cup finals, winning one, and one of their players wins a Ballon d'Or in the 50s, and we'll get to that in due course. So, just before and just after the Second World War, Blackpool are a very, very decent side. They're a very competitive side. They're just not quite getting over the hump. They only win the one trophy, which is one of the FA Cup finals that they appear in, known as the Matthews Final, which we'll discuss in due course. Possibly one of the most famous FA Cup finals in history. Also, a thrilling FA Cup final by all accounts, because there's 7 goals in it. So, in the 1947-48 season, they reached an FA Cup final, and in the 1950-51 season, they reached the FA Cup final. It's third time lucky with the FA Cup with Blackpool in the 52-53 season. They win the FA Cup versus Bolton. Final score is 4-3. They're 3-1 down at half-time, and it is known as the Matthews final because of Sir Stanley Matthews playing in it. Amongst other things, I think it was his third attempt at an FA Cup. They finally win it. Not long after that, they're Division 1 runners-up in the 55-56 season to Manchester United. That is the closest they've got to league success, and it's that same year, in 1956, that Sir Stanley Matthews wins the first ever Ballon d'Or. So there you go. So when you think of your Messis and your Ronaldos and all that, winning the Ballon d'Or, Sir Stanley Matthews, he's on there with the first ever win of that individual award. There you go. Now, 20 years after all this competitive side, really good side, very competitive side, very good side, a lot of players in the Blackpool side end up playing for England, including Sir Stanley Matthews and Jimmy Armfield. The Oyston family in 1987 come along, and this is the dark days of the club. This is when there are a lot of question marks over the ownership, and a lot of those questions were proven right, unfortunately. A lot of the questions that the FA and the fans were asking ended up being proven right. So the Oyston family, under Owen Oyston, buy the club in 1987. What a shambles this period is until 2019. So the Oyston family. Personally, I would think the least said about this family, the better. But we have to discuss them. So Owen Oyston, the father of the family, he's found guilty of some sexual offences and goes to prison for a while. His wife Vicky and his son Carl end up running the club. In 2018, now this is crucial, the High Court found an illegitimate asset stripping of 26.77 million to fund themselves and their other companies had taken place with the football club over a significant period of time, and fans were already questioning the transfer budget. The club budgets, the direction of the club. Can we get back to the Premier League after just a single season in the Premier League? Earlier in the decade, all these questions were coming up, and the Oyston family, especially Carl, were very, very vicious in their response. Carl Oyston famously, labels a fan an intellectual retard, for example, in an exchange, which was recorded, which ultimately led to him having a footballing ban and a £40,000 fine. Anyway, thankfully, the Oystons were finally forced to sell up, and a local businessman called Simon Sadler bought the club in 2019, which is fantastic news. The club is stable now. They're stable in the Championship. They're a mid-table club in the Championship, which is no offence, I think, to Blackpool. I think that's a fair assessment of where the club is right now. Obviously, we would like to see them back in the top flight and give it a better go than what they did in their single season in the Premier League, and they hadn't been in the top flight since the 60s, I believe, at this point. So The club had been badly owned, badly run, and the Oyston family, much like many other bad ownership groups that have run football clubs, really highlights the toothless nature of football governance and the toothless nature of the fit and proper persons test and regularly auditing clubs, because the fact that a High Court judgment found basically illegitimate stripping of club assets of 26.77 million to fund their lifestyle and other business ventures just sums up how toothless the FA and the Football League and the Premier League really are when it comes to football club governance. And that, I think, should be a concerning sign to fan bases, not just in the UK but around the world, that how weak football governance really is. And that is my assessment on that. Now let's have a look at the honours. Now you'd think Stanley Matthews would be a record holder for lots of things. He's not. The honours, obviously the FA Cup in the 52-53 season, famously against Bolton. Runners-up in the 47-48 and 50-51 seasons as well. So there you go. That was their window of success, which shuts very quickly. Most league appearances, Jimmy Armfield actually has that, not Sir Stanley Matthews, with 569 between the 27th of December 54 and the 1st of May 71. So there you go, Jimmy Armfield. Top goal scorer, Jimmy Hampson. So if your name's Jimmy and you play for Blackpool, you're very likely to have a record. Jimmy Hampson's their top ever goal scorer with 252. I didn't get how many league appearances he did that in, but he did that between the 15th of October 1927 and the 8th of January 1938. Most caps for your country, Jimmy Armfield again with 43 for England. So it's not Sir Stanley Matthews, it's Jimmy Armfield again holds a record. I don't think that gets broken for a while. And the longest serving manager, as I said, Joe Smith, 22 years and 9 months between the 1st of August 1935 and the 30th of April 1958. So there are some really interesting things there. Stanley Matthews, while he's won a Ballon d'Or, and I will mention him, doesn't have any of the goal-scoring records or appearance records. So there you go. And there it is, Blackpool. They could have won a lot more in the 40s and 50s, but they just win that one FA Cup. It's a bit of bad luck in there. But they made 3 FA Cup finals in a row and were league runners-up in the 55-56 season. So that is as close as Blackpool have come to any further silverware. And yeah, some bad ownership in the late 80s to very recently until 2019 has really cost his club the direction and the success it craves. So hopefully we see Blackpool back in the Premier League, and hopefully we see Blackpool win maybe some more cup competitions, maybe even a league title in my lifetime. We'll see if that ever happens. Very famous club for good and for bad, and of course the Stanley Matthews and the Matthews final is folklore. But there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Please place your thoughts in the comments section below, and I'll have some more content for you very, very soon.